inviting everybody to have an opportunity to enter the room. Someone once said to me, people don't enter a meeting until they open their mouth. And that is one of the best learnings I've ever had, is before you dive into anything, get people to contribute. And that could be saying, hi, how are you feeling today? Or something that happens on your mind. You can go really out there with the questions, but 30 seconds. And it also gives people insight into who someone else is, so they don't come up with stereotypes and the whole thing of like, I'm just going to ignore you because you don't mean anything to me. As soon as you invite people to share something about their life, people get curious and they start to open up in a way that means that you actually create more empathy and you create more trust and more rapport and intimacy immediately.
That's Georgie Nightingall, and this is the All Things Risk podcast. Welcome back, one and all, to the All Things Risk podcast. I'm Ben Catania, your host. This is my show where we go long form on risk and uncertainty. I hope you and your loved ones and friends are all well in spite of the circumstances. And when I say well, I mean physically, mentally, and financially. These are incredibly unorthodox times, of course, as we self-isolate. And self-isolation can be very difficult. And if you've come across any of the advice about how to best deal with self-isolation, quarantine, social distancing, etc., things from astronauts, submariners, etc., you'll come across a number of very common points. Have a routine, stay physically active, and so on. But there is one bit of advice that I think is crucial, and one that I think we all find really very challenging. And this goes before we even had this coronavirus pandemic. And that is how to maintain and create meaningful connections with other people. However, as you will hear, now is a great time to do that via DMCs, deep, meaningful conversations. My guest in this episode is Georgie Nightingall. Georgie is the founder of a business called Trigger Conversations, which is all about helping individuals and organizations engineer meaningful and stimulating conversations so that they happen more often. And it's an inspiring organization, and Georgie's an inspiring person to learn from. They started this organization, and she started it back in October of 2016, and they haven't looked back since. They've stimulated 5,000 plus meaningful conversations between strangers and 80 plus events. Georgie has trained organizations. She's given a TedX talk on this topic. And in this episode, you are going to hear some excellent tips and tools that we all need right now to take advantage of what is, quite frankly, an opportunity to connect and reconnect with others. And as you will also hear, that starts by embracing the uncertainty that an interaction with another human being can bring. Georgie shares a ton of great things here, and this was a lot of fun to do as well. So let's get into it. Here is Georgie Nightingall. Georgie, welcome to the All Things Risk podcast. This is the highlight of my day. I'm looking forward to this. It's great to have you on.
Thank you. You're going to be the highlight of my day as well, potentially.
Fantastic. Good to hear. So right off the bat, I think we've got one thing in common, and that is that we both hate the question, what do you do? And I want to start this off with not what do you do, but why do you hate the question, what do you do?
That is a better question, actually, because it asks me about my preferences. And I think that is what annoys me the most about that question, what do you do, is that you're asking me for a label and then it's potentially assuming and taking the assumption that that is who I am. And I dislike that question because it often leads to boring conversations, because people have a sense of their elevator pitch. They'll tell you what they do. It's not original. It's coming from a place of like a script, is what I'd call it. and it doesn't actually tell me anything really about who they are. And often people then will respond and think, oh, the stereotypes, you hear, who are you? Or I work in PR, I'm a banker, or I'm a nurse, whatever it is. And people have a sense of what they think it is to be like that, and they'll assume that's who you are. And I am absolutely none of the jobs that I have had in the past. Of course, there are parts of my personality, maybe at a given moment in time, but I used to get annoyed at it when I was a project manager. I was doing a job which I thought was really interesting, and it was highly complex. And I would tell people, and I used to experiment with my answers. I'd be like, project manager, or project manager working at this organization, or project manager working in this organization, doing this project, and this is what I'm enjoying about it or not enjoying about it. And then I realized eventually that if people did ask me that, stories are much better. And basically, I answered questions that they didn't ask me. Yeah, so that's the kind of the general thought behind the question. And I think also it turns everyone off because everyone knows it's coming. Everyone has it like planned, and people's curiosity lens just does not switch on. So I try and refrain from asking it as much as possible and answering it as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective, and that's how I feel about the question. And I also find myself whenever I ask that question at a function or something. So I've got my little boxes of 20 or 30 things that people are. So if I hear project manager, I've got some assumptions I've already made about that person, where they went to school, that certain jobs might be, these might be the boring people because they do this type of job. If someone says they're an accountant, then, well, I might start kind of wandering around, looking at other people in the room to talk to, because I know this is going to be a boring conversation about whatever. And so but here I am in front of this person and an opportunity to speak to a human being, and I'm squandering that opportunity by asking us, a question that's going to give me a scripted response. So what's a better question to ask someone, or what's a better way to approach that?
Yeah. So there's a couple of approaches that I would go with. So you could have a different kind of question which you always ask. And I have friends who are big networkers, and they ask things like, what are you passionate about? What makes you come alive? Right. So that invites people to open up and share something which is meaningful to them about how they like to spend time. And because often right, people don't like their job. So it is a nice opener, and it's also a very positive one. And that has led to some good conversations. However, I don't like that question because I feel like, we're back in the script again, and I'm asking the same thing but with different people. I prefer to improvise, and the way I do this is I generally make statements or ask questions that arise from the given moment, and that could be about myself, it could be about the person, or it could be about the environment we share. So I might share something like, gosh, I'm actually extremely hungry right now, or caffeine deprived, or I've just been thinking about blah blah blah. So I might offer something out, and then people can take it if they want to and respond to it. And it means the conversation kind of builds organically rather than me narrowing focus in with the question, because questions have a very particular agenda to them. Or I can notice something about you. I can notice the fact that, you're sitting in your bedroom, and I almost wanted to say earlier, and how funny that we're having this conversation now, and I'm going to see some of your home life. So that might lead us then down a curiosity route somewhere else, because we've gone from where we are in the environment. Or I might talk about the environment, which is, we are having a conversation over Zoom, or over Skype actually, and aren't all conversations right now over Skype and Zoom, aren't they doing so well? So we could talk about that shared thing that we're experiencing together. And if you're out and about, say, in a real life event, those things that did used to happen, you might be there for a reason. And that could be there for the question you could draw out of that is, so what motivated you to come to this event? Or the standard, which is a bit more boring, but you can still use as, so how do you know so-and-so? I didn't like that one because, again, it gets overused. But you can always take something out of where you are. And also, what I think about that is it's fresh and novel. It encourages people to actually take a moment to pause, to reflect, and to look inside and come up with something which is original. And then your conversation goes in an interesting tangent, because you haven't started in a place where you've started before. So you have no recollection of previous answer that you can go from, but actually you're forced into the present to share something which is authentic and meaningful for you right now.
One thing that's interesting about networking events and those kinds of things, and it's quite the opposite of what you've just described, is we often want to get certain messages across to other people, especially if you're trying to get something out of a networking event. I want to get a sales lead, right? So I need to get in what I do and who I, or whatever the context might be. So we're trying to inject these messages, but that is the opposite of what you're talking about. Is I'm probably not going to remember the person I'm speaking to very well if I'm just injecting my messages about what my business does, and maybe you're a prospect and maybe you're not.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance, actually, because as you say, in one sense, you do want to communicate the things that you can offer, who are some of the professional roles and services that you might offer, for sure. And that helps people find ways that they can connect with you, ways they can do business with you, et cetera, et cetera. However, I think it's about timing. And I also think it's about recognizing that also all opportunities with a human are about actually investing in the long term. You're building a relationship. When you go to a networking event, you shouldn't be needing to talk to everybody and exchange business cards. For me, I see that as a failure. A good networking event for me, or an event, is I've spoken to 3 to 5 people and had meaningful conversations where I felt like I got to know who they really were. They got to know who I was. People don't remember what you say. They remember how you make them feel. How much can I tap into who they are and let them see who I am? And what I often find in the situations is the labels I want to share, the stories and the potential opportunities, they'll come naturally. Because what happens is people like you, then they get curious about you, and then the questions become out of the context and they come out of curiosity rather than a sense of needing to ask. That's where the magic happens. And I would say as well, though, that one thing I've been experimenting with is, how much you do tell someone, how much you don't tell someone. Like, I went through a stage of basically not telling anyone what I did. And when they asked me the question, I would refuse. And it annoyed some people, actually. But I think one of the things that wasn't helpful was that there was a lot of opportunity there for me to add value, or vice versa. And by staying away from that topic of conversation, we therefore couldn't show that value at that point in time. So when I have conversations with people, I do drop in things that I call offers. So I'll share things about, what I'm doing work-wise, things that happened recently to me, thoughts I'd had, things I've read, what it is. And then people see them and they're interested. They'll then call me up on them. And then we can go down that route. But we can go down that route naturally, and I've given them an opportunity. It's not like I feel like I have to talk about my work and blah, blah, blah. Because you talk about work, you're missing an entire pie, the rest of it, of what it is to be human. And that's much more interesting.
Well, we've started to get into what makes a good conversation, and we'll go back to that. But I want to know how you became a conversation expert, I guess, or a curious about being a conversationalist. Maybe I use not quite the right word, but how did you founded this thing called Trigger Conversations? I want to know about your journey. I want to know how you got here around why do you set up events about having better conversations? Why did you set up an organization about conversations? What is it that drew you to this?
So it's interesting when people ask you that question, because I never know when the story actually starts. And one of the stories starts, I think, in 2016 when I was the project manager and I was feeling that frustration of being asked that question. And the reason that I decided to do something about it was because it was my problem. Like, I was living in London and working my first proper job, I suppose, or not first, but one of the first few. And I'd come from a fairly rich intellectual background, university, having really interesting conversations every day. And, of course, you have the what are you studying? Would always be the opening conversation there. But, and so in the work life, talking simply about work with people I didn't know. And then my friends would ask me, so how was work? So I spent my entire life talking about work. And I noticed that what was missing is this opportunity for rich exploration. Exploration of thought, when you actually genuinely feel like you have connected with a human, got to know them, felt like you've advanced some of your thoughts and changed, maybe even reshaped what you're thinking and your perspectives, and ones that left me feel inspired and upbeat. And I'd probably call these DMCs, like, the deep, meaningful conversations. And they weren't happening every few weeks at 2 a.m. in the morning at a party. And I was really annoyed about the fact that I couldn't control when they happened. I was like, this just isn't enough. I wish I could have more of this. And like most things in my life, when I want something to happen, I basically decide that I'm going to find out how I can make it happen. And for me, it was like, okay, so it happens sometimes and it doesn't happen sometimes. Why is it happening? What is it about the situation? So I decided I would find a way to deconstruct the behaviors that were at play and the norms. And then I would start building new behaviors and norms through whatever ways I could, and to see if that would influence the situation and actually create those spaces.
How did you do that? How did you deconstruct that?
So my first observation was potentially it's the people. So potentially it's that we get stuck in patterns and routines when we're with certain people and certain relationships. So my first experiment, or sort of first experiment, was I hosted a lot of parties in my home, and I decided to host a party called BYOF, which was called Bring Your Own Friend. And the rule was you had to bring someone fresh. And I thought, okay, great, we'll change the environment, we'll shuffle things up a bit, and hopefully that will change things. And I ran through them, and I would say it was quite successful. It was more than anything a great learning opportunity. One, I got to make some new friends, which was great. Amazing to have a party and meet new people at it. But then I noticed that people would still get stuck and they would still go back to that question. And I was like, okay, so why are they going back to the question? Well, it's because it's safe and because it's expected. So I thought, well, okay, so what's happening now is that people are behaving in the herd mentality as they always do because they're trying to not do anything which might risk, say, being rejected or being seen as weird or whatever it is. And I realized at that point, okay, so what I need to do is I need to create a space where that question is banned, where we can't actually follow down the normal patterns and scripts. But then I also realized, well, if you take it away, then what happens is people suddenly don't know what they can talk about. So I realized, okay, so I need to insert what the right behavior or the different behavior is that they want. And that kind of process took a few months to play with in my mind and in practice. And it wasn't until I was at a festival in the summer of 2016 that I committed to a stranger I just met that I was going to create this event to have meaningful conversations. And then once I made the commitment, within 24 hours, I had the whole setup structure, what it looked like, wrote it on the back of a notebook. And I had his email, so I obviously emailed him and he came to the first one, which was pretty cool. So it was like, I think sometimes you commit to something and you've been letting your ideas brew for long enough, you come up with the answers. And certainly my mentality these days is like I tend to say yes to things and then work out how to do them in the until they actually arrive. So yeah, I don't know if that helps. And I suppose I should add as well that I've always been fascinated by people. I've always been interested in psychology, and I never studied it formally. I did some informal courses at university, but I did then also do a master's that was a little bit applied psychology and a little bit applied linguistics, and that got me interested in language and how different organizations speak differently. So I analyzed a semi-military context and the army, and that was fascinating. I learned like how you can ask questions which aren't really questions. So that made me really, really interested in what's happening in the micro kind of structures of language. And I suppose the psychological stuff is more macro. And then obviously since then, I've just basically any opportunity I'm at, I watch, see what's happening, and I start deconstructing and forming a hypothesis about what's happening. And then I'll test it out in my daily life as well.
There's a lot of really good stuff there. One of the things, as you were talking, that I remember of some of my experience when I was a student, I would go to certain parties or things, and I would go not because of the party, but because I knew towards the end of the evening, there would be a few people kind of left over who didn't get too drunk or whatever. And we'd have these great conversations at the end of the party. But that wasn't what the point of the party was. But I knew that, 6 or 8 interesting people would be there, and that we'd have, there would be a moment in the evening where we'd have a really good conversation. But that would happen later. Or it would be, in the dorms or something like that, where people are, after they've come back and they're just sort of hanging around, and you'd have some really good conversations when people's guards would be down, and that would be as you say, that would be the kind of, the catalyst would be the people, but also the environment, and just having a sort of feeling of this is the right type of thing to do. So I'm fascinated by how can I recreate that? What are some of the ways in which we can recreate that? And I want to dive into this situation we're in with the coronavirus, and people they're at home and they're physically away from people, and one of the most important things is to connect with people. So I want to maybe help people who are listening to this right now connect or reconnect with people. And so how could you have a meaningful conversation over Zoom or Skype or a phone call with someone in this current context?
Gosh, there's so much to say, partly because so you've taken the whole situation of what you do in real life, and now it's virtually. Yeah. And so there's a lot more like we can do, and much more effort we need to put into potentially. I suppose it's worth saying that, you can pick up and have a meaningful conversation, pick up the phone and have a meaningful conversation with anybody, anytime. And I think that one thing I've noticed in the last 2 weeks is that how easy it is for me to pick up my phone and simply ring the person I'm thinking about in that given moment. Now, that's not something that I used to do. I used to think, oh, it's probably not the right time to call them. I probably should schedule in their time to call them. Maybe I should send them an email, depending on who they are. Partly because my diary was so rammed, but also, I don't know, there seems to be this distance between, just doing it now. And actually, I love doing that, picking up, and I'll pick up the phone when I can. And if I can't, one of my other tricks, which I love, and actually I picked up way before the Corona times, is WhatsApp voice notes. They are delicious. That is just the right word, actually, because you can hear so much in someone's voice. And what I like about them as well is that rather than a voicemail, which is kind of like, you've got 20 seconds, so you just rush through to say something which is probably not very helpful. With the voice note, you take your time to check in and kind of say, hey, I'm just thinking of you, and I wanted to say this, and you're thinking it through. What happens is you get human error. People will inevitably say the wrong thing, or they'll laugh, and then you get to see a wonderful side of that person. And actually, we all fall in love with each other's things that we do badly,
quirks
the weird
and ticks and things like that. Yeah, exactly.
So you see that showing up in the message, and you can also hear in the voice something which is beyond just, people seem to open up as well, I think, when they are not faced with having to communicate something. They're just there to share something, say hi, basically. It's like the classic thing. When you want to have a good conversation with somebody, a meaningful conversation, you go for a walk, because you're not looking at each other. Everyone trying to say that, everyone's like, yes. And in a car going driving, right? Same thing. I take conversations on walks the entire time, whatever. I don't think that made sense, but you get the idea. And so that's kind of goes without saying, is just pick up the phone. Just do it, send a voice note. You never know how it's going to land with people. Generally, sometimes people take a bit of time to adjust, and then they actually learn to love it. I definitely was one of those people in the beginning. So that, I think, is like how to have meaningful conversations with people. You probably would already do it. In terms of virtually and doing it online, so we're basically talking Zoom and Skype. And I actually really like Zoom. I use it a lot, and I've been really interested in how to make it more of a creative and playful space, and also how to use what you have. So the joy of me sitting in my bedroom right now, and you sitting probably in your bedroom as well, is that I can actually see what's behind you. I've got amazing insight into the life of Ben. Yeah,
and I'm slightly ashamed to sort of see. There's a pair of jeans hanging, and there's a mirror that hasn't been fully washed. This sort of thing. But that's the situation, right? That's today. That's what's going on now.
Exactly. That is today, and it's funny how, like, week beforehand we all felt we had to have these masks of professionalism, and now it's like, hey, calling from home with a cup of tea, I've got my sixth of the day or whatever it is, and it invites that human touch. Now, I really, really cannot say how I think important this is to inject yourself and to inject humor and play and spontaneity into how you talk to people. And let's face it, Zoom calls can be awfully boring. And when you're sitting away from people and you're not really in the room physically, it's so easy to check out, to put yourself on mute, sit there, and then I'll just start going on Facebook, or I'll type, or whatever it is. And I have felt that myself. So
I think we've all been there. Yeah.
Yeah.
With video conferences in particular at home and things like that. It's just it's awful.
It is awful. And I think it's partly is because we have this mentality of, okay, we're going to have a call where it's going to be a relationship of one to many rather than many to many. A conversation is where you listen and you get to participate. So the key thing here is actually creating the space and facilitating and holding that space for people to actually have a voice. And that means the beginning of every call, checking in and checking out, inviting everybody to have an opportunity to enter the room. Someone once said to me, people don't enter a meeting until they've opened their mouth. And that was one of the best learnings I've ever had, is before you dive into anything, get people to contribute. And that could be saying, hi, how are you feeling today? Or something that happens on your mind. You can go really out there with the questions, but 30 seconds. And it also gives people insight into who someone else is, so they don't come up with all the stereotypes and the whole thing of like, I'm just going to ignore you because you don't mean anything to me. As soon as you invite people to share something about their life, people get curious and they start to open up in a way that means that you actually create more empathy and you create more trust and more rapport and intimacy immediately.
Yeah, that's good. I dislike small talk with a passion, right? And I dislike certain questions that have become questions that are meant to do that, but questions people ask because they feel a social obligation. Etiquette demands that I ask you how your weekend was, and I'm actually really bad. I'd be a bad person if I didn't ask you how your weekend was, but everyone expects that question on a Monday morning, and it's, oh, it was great, it's good, or whatever. And it's like, ugh.
This is one technique that I teach around navigating small talk is breaking the script. So when you have those kinds of questions, which are almost expected, how do you ask a question which is related but not the same question? So, how was your weekend? Translates to, what was the most surprising thing that happened to you this weekend? Yeah. So you're still going on the theme that's expected, but you're inviting someone to think about something specific that's different, that also helps them go back to the memory to reflect. So they might even learn something in the process of sharing it with you.
And I think when you ask that question and they're recalling and they're giving you the answer, they're not putting that, they don't have any time to put that filter on of how is this going to look? Or, oh, I did this silly thing over the weekend and oh shit, what is he going to think about me if I did, that all of these, we start to play in our minds. I think this happens a lot in social media. I don't know what your take is on this, but the problem with social media is that everything's really, really curated, and this is the image I want to project. And when you have these kind of small talk conversations, it's, what did you do over the weekends? I went for a 30K run, and then I, had whatever, I took the kids out to volunteer at the church, and whatever. But if you ask the question, it's because of my perfect life that I lead. But when you ask the question, what was the most surprising thing, then it becomes, I got really upset at the clerk at whatever, the post office or something like that. I don't know. And that leads to an interesting story potentially. Yes,
and that's the key thing, is the storytelling. It's not, I'm going to give you a label that I previously thought about. I'm actually going to dig into my experience of being human, and I'm going to tell you something about that. And that's something I could resonate with. It'll make me more curious, for instance, down the long run. So I've noticed that there's sometimes people feel an opposition that they feel they don't really want to ask different questions like that. So another way to get around that, which I feel like is probably one of my most effective tools, is the principle of going first, which means you want to set the scene to have a place where a container that is open-minded, vulnerable, curious, authentic, then you have to do that first. You have to live the principle. And what that will do is people, so in a context where people especially don't know how to behave because it's new to them, let's take events or communities they're not normally part of, or even just virtual, Zoom conversations. people don't know how to show up because they don't know the rules, the unwritten rules that are there. So the best way to influence is to show them how people behave in that space. And then people will just follow suit like sheep. It is the most amazing thing. Oldest trick in the book. But, okay, have you ever done that thing where you're doing a team workshop and everyone's like, we're going to go around, and we're going to do introductions. You're going to say, your name. And so if you start and go, hey, I'm Robert. I work as a project manager and I live in London. Then the next person is probably going to say, hey, I'm Sheila.
Yeah.
I'm a writer and I live in Newington-on-Trent. That's interesting. I don't know why I thought about that, but yeah. However, if I say, hey, I'm Georgie and I do a lot of things right now, so I'm not really sure how to define myself, but one of the things that's really got me interested this week is thinking about how we can do better virtual connection and have more meaningful conversations online, because it seems like everyone sort of needs this now. We're quarantined. Suddenly, it's got more interesting.
The next person thinks, oh shit, what am I?
It's really funny because people then change their response based on what the other person said before.
Yes,
it's a classic thing. But it and if I chose in this world to something vulnerable, like I actually know how I'm feeling right now because everything around me is changing, and I mean, even the Zoom call, I'm not really sure how to run it. Suddenly people feel a sense of like empathy and like, yeah, I feel it too, I'm there. And really, let's face it, we all feel, we have the whole spectrum of feelings in us. We aren't perfection itself. We're never perfection. In fact, we're perfectly flawed, I think is the best way to say it. If you can just open up and be vulnerable, be authentic, then other people will do it too, and they'll be a much better version of themselves. That's
great, because you're revealing a human side of you, and if this is all about connecting with another human being and other human beings, then we need to do that.
Yeah, completely.
So I want to get into this thing about the unknown as well, because also when you're doing that, you don't know where the conversation might go. And so if you say, well, I want to talk about how we can make better connections, then it might, a natural question might be, well, why have you had a bad experience, or are you having difficulty with, or have you noticed something that struck you, or there's all kinds of directions in which that could go when you say something that's authentic. So what holds people back, do you think?
Holds them back from doing what in particular?
From say revealing a more human side, from being a little bit more authentic, from from going first, because I think going first for a lot of people, that terrifies them.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It's terrifying until you have an experience that shows you how actually useful it is to be confident, because confidence is attractive, right? A quality in people. There's definitely a risk. I think the thing is that if you don't know what is expected, especially in an environment that you're not familiar with, then you don't want to speak outside of what might be expected in the rules, the informal rules that exist in every single context. And therefore you risk outing yourself of that community and that group. You risk not being accepted. You risk being rejected. Which is
terrifying. I mean, we have, this is a human survival instinct to stay within the tribe. And
yeah, really. Yeah, I mean, I sometimes struggle with this. I'm like, so I know that my character can be a little bit crazy and a bit weird, and now I'm so much more okay with that. And in fact, I kind of like allowing myself to express on my colors. And yet there are environments that I go into and I think, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah.
But I realize, no, that's a story I'm telling myself about the assumptions I'm making. So I have to keep saying to myself, okay, these are just humans. Yes, they're in fully black suits and they seem all very seriousness and very credible or whatever, but actually we've got a lot in common right now. And actually, if I make a joke or I do something wrong, I say something it's not what they want to hear, or I mess up in some point, they might forgive me, and actually it might break the ice. Yeah, so that's not what you're going to say.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think more people should be doing that. And I think sometimes it's what we have an opportunity right now in that we were talking about this before we went live, in that the rules are changing, right? So the expectations about behavior are changing a little bit. More people are, because we're forced to, right? So we have to connect with others remotely. We've got to connect with our colleagues remotely. So there's kind of an opportunity right now to kind of throw the rule book a little bit out the window when it comes to interaction.
Yes, actually, I think that I'm loving how open people are, and also and with that vulnerability right now. I do this anyway in my conversations, but I noticed an increase in this last week when I spoke to new clients, old clients, customer services. I had my computer mended, had cancelled appointments, the whole bun. And I asked people, how they were responding right now, what's going on for them. And oh my God, I had entire life stories. And some people's greatest fears are oh, I'm running a small business, and actually, we might be destroyed by this. We got talking about his family, and I realized, this is what we kind of need, is to be able to admit we haven't all got it sorted, and that there's plenty of room to be able to help each other, support each other, or just listen to each other. I'm not asking you to solve my problems by the fact that I'm telling you them. So I really feel like that's been a really nice change. And now I can't even remember what question you asked me.
Well, I'm not sure it was a question. It was more of just an observation that I think more people the rules are kind of, the rules of interaction.
Yes.
They've gone out the window and a little bit, because we're not in the office and we're not forced to ask the same stupid questions about our weekends and these kinds of things. The routines have changed, and so that opens up loads of things. A little example might be doing video calls with colleagues, and then making sure that we put the video on and seeing, how this person dresses, for example, in their home. It's oh, I didn't know you had a t-shirt that had, I don't know, this rock band on it. I didn't know you liked them. And then all of a sudden it's, you create another level of understanding of that person. That wouldn't have happened if we went through our normal kind of routines. I think the point that you made about people being scared is also interesting, because I think there are a lot of us are scared right now, which is an interesting thing to explore.
And the fear from some of the calls I've had, I'm a member of a number of communities, and I've jumped into a lot of group calls. Some I facilitated myself, some other people, and there is a lot of fear, and there's a lot of I guess it's just fear of the unknown and what will happen or what might happen. And we were talking about this last night in this book club I'm part of. And one of the questions that I asked myself in the last week, I've written a blog about questions I've been asking myself to try and ground myself in reality. One of those questions was, what can I control? What can't I control? And for me, that was just the most helpful set of questions, because it was great, I can control how much money I spend. Perfect. I can't control the holiday I lost, whether I'm going to get ill, whether anyone in my family else is going to get ill, whether I might die, whether what else can I control? What's going to happen, how long it's going to happen for, whether we'll ever go back to the normal. And a few other things came up as well. And for me, just getting that on paper was oh, okay, it's quite a lot. Well, there's no point worrying about it, because I can't do it. I can't change any of this, really. What I can do is accept what's happening, and then I can look within it for finding those moments of opportunities, like we were saying before this call, is given the circumstance and the status quo now, what's needed? Do what you can with what you have where you are. What, Theodore Roosevelt's almost correct quote. I believe more than ever that actually the risk per se is made up. It's this idea we have in our minds of what might happen. And it's based on our own experiences, which come from very particular contexts. And because of confirmation bias, we will always be looking to confirm what we already know and think we know. which kind of creates that awful circular effect. In the end, you don't take any risks. And actually, going back to conversation and connection stuff, I remember when I was doing sort of daily challenges with this charisma course I was on, and I remember looking at some of them thinking, I just can't do this. Like, one of them was like, ask for free coffee, free drink. I was like, they'll say no, and it was like, you've got to ask a minimum of 5 times. And I was also feeling so uncomfortable about it, because I don't like the idea of asking for things, especially things that cost. But I was like, I'll do the challenge. And on the 5th time, he was like, okay, and I was fine, kind of thing. And I realized, I was like, oh, it actually wasn't as difficult as I expected. And they were quite charming about it and loving, and no one rejected me, and it went totally okay. And that was just entirely out of my stream of experience and consciousness. There's so many things out there I haven't experienced. And also, every experience actually really is unique to that moment in time. How you respond today won't necessarily be how you respond next week.
Yeah, we're different every day, right? How we wake up and how much sleep we've gotten, something that's gone well or not gone well. Yeah, that makes and that's why every conversation with sometimes the same person can go a little bit different as well. So the people that I really enjoy conversations with, you never kind of know where you're going to end up. You might end up in a silly place or deep place or whatever, and because people are bringing in it's like the dirty mirror behind me. That's what's going on today, right?
Yeah. And going back to what you were saying as well about entering it without an agenda, entering without a sense of knowing where you're going. I think this is what makes conversations incredibly powerful. Is the whole purpose of a conversation is to have a conversation. Of course, I'll admit, some conversations at work, you've got to communicate a certain amount of information, come to a certain decision about something, right? The agenda is very... When it comes to talking to people and having a relationship with them, you're there to explore. You're exploring thoughts and feelings and ideas as they come up. The whole point is to be present to that experience and to be able to follow as you get the invitation and the curiosity in that moment.
Yes.
And
yes.
And being led by curiosity means that you're not thinking 10 steps ahead. You might think, oh, that's an interesting thought, maybe I'll ask this later. But you're thinking, oh, that's interesting, and that leads me to another thought, and then you go down this other tangent, and that goes to another tangent, and then another tangent, and before you know it, you have no idea how you got there, which is the point.
I love that. I love that. And for those of us who work in an office environment, it's the exact opposite of what happens in most meetings and things. It's just, okay, well, let's stop the chit chat. Let's stop going off on tangents. Who's going to do X, right? And then you just kind of like, oh, yeah. So you got to the place of, okay, we understand who's going to do X, but it's it's a completely different experience.
Completely different.
And also why I suppose we're kind of. Do you think that we're getting better at conversations, or do you think that there are things going on, kind of forces at work that are moving us away from having great conversations? It's kind of a. I think
that feels like a leading question. I feel you know the answer to this.
Yeah.
So I think we can't really have this conversation without talking about technology as one of the influencing factors. And I think it's pretty clear that the more time we spend on technology and away face to face, then we probably do lose something of the magic. And I think we're losing it in a different number of ways as well, because some of the best conversations I have come out of tiny moments in the day when it's least expected. When I'm next to the coffee machine and walking down the corridor and sitting at lunch. And if you're preoccupied with a task or with staring at your phone, the invitation is not there in the same way. You have to make an effort to actually get up and talk to somebody. And we seem to also believe that prioritizing technology and will actually make us more effective and productive. And without realizing that sometimes that space in which things emerge is where innovation happens. I think about creativity in itself. It's a process that takes time. You have an initial idea, you go and do something else that influences that idea, you go and talk to somebody else, and that builds on that idea and changes its trajectory. If you lose the spaces in which to have those kinds of conversations, to share thought and ideas, then what happens? You lose the ideas, you lose those opportunities. And in the same way with connection, we're having a problem with loneliness and community and connection. Well, if we're only talking to each other through technological devices, which we know for sure don't have the same level of nourishment and hormones and all that, those good vibes and good feelings that you actually need, then we aren't going to be facilitating the connection that people need, the emotional and social well-being, right? And also, the other thing as well is that we're making it less okay. If we think about nudges and permission, if you're sitting next to somebody and we don't have any technology, it's just much easier to start talking to them. Obviously, it depends on the context you're in. Sometimes with your strangers, it may not be as normal. However, if you're next to somebody and they're on the phone, you feel like you have to interrupt them in order to talk. And then you might have a story in your head about the fact that they're probably busy anyway, and what have you got to say? So you're already distancing yourself as well. So we're going further and further away from actually having that opportunity just to connect with people and see where it goes. So I definitely think that's playing a role. And I would also like to add that I am, like many people, I'm also addicted to my iPhone. And I've had to put various controls in place to ensure I don't do that, and to remind myself of the magic of being able to talk to somebody face to face. I've got that pure attention and that presence. It's just not the same. Of course, now we're in a virtual connection space. We're now stuck on our phones yet again. However, I've still taken that as a lesson. I'm like, okay, well, how can I either get on voice notes, WhatsApp voice notes, or how can I schedule a time on Zoom where my phone is away and I'm actually still having the dialogue?
I know some people now that are scheduling like tea times and coffee times together. So, or dinner times even. And you'd make, this is what I'm cooking, this is what someone else is cooking. What do you make of the mukbang phenomenon? The mukbang, when people so it's this really popular thing, and it started in Korea, where people just film themselves talking and eating dinner just on their own, right? On their own. And they're just kind of making their dinner, or they've ordered something and they say, this is what this is. And I never got it. But actually there's a sharing, even though it's one way that's going on. So I it's fascinating, isn't it? I like sharing one way sometimes. I think that it's a form of content, right? Whether it be via a video or a voice note or a blog, right? It's kind of the same thing. You're sharing your own experience of something and how your thoughts and feelings around that experience. So that's interesting. And it goes back to the same point, though, is that enough? Are we heavily leaning too much towards on one-way conversation? It really amuses me when organizations say, we're going to run an event. We're going to have the speaker. Why don't you join the conversation? And I'm like, it's not a conversation. It's a talk. If it was a conversation, I would be able to get to say something at some point as well. And they never really include that. And actually, such a great shame. Okay, let's take conferences, right? Complete waste of potential. Who are the most interesting people at conferences? Well, of course, everyone assumes it's the speakers. What about everybody in the room who's traveled all over the world, who probably has just as much expertise and interest as everyone else? And yet everyone heads to the talks, spends the breaks in the loo or on their phone or catching up on emails. There's no space being created for you to invite a conversation with somebody else there, to be able to build a relationship, learn from them, maybe even further develop what you've learned already in the conference, right? And to go somewhere else. And I've run events for a few conferences where they were noticing they were actually being really innovative. They were like, you know what? We're not using the time well, and we're talking on email for most of the year, and then we've got this amazing time for 2 days, and we hardly talk to each other.
And they were super skeptical at first of some of the trade conversations event I ran. And then by the end of it, they were like, that was marvelous. And I learned so much about that person. And I really felt connected and got to know them as a human, which means that my whole experience will shift and change.
Yes. I agree with all of that on conferences and what employers do. And again, these things that we can do to make us feel a little bit more connected. I do want to get into trigger conversations, but before I do, one of the things I just wanted to ask you a little bit about is you're a little bit more of your own journey in that you kind of saw a problem and you decided to solve it. But did you have to work your way up to that? How long did you see this problem before you felt like, geez, I've got to do something?
Okay, so I think what happens when we see a problem, maybe this is my own perspective, but when we see a problem in their life, we're like, oh, that's not what I want right now. My friend calls this disappointment meditation. You notice when it's something that's not what you want. And often what will happen is you'll be like, okay, well, next week I'll get what I want. And then next week comes along and you're like, that's still not what I want. And for me, I think at first I kind of felt like I feel a little bit lacking in something. There's something missing here. I'm a bit bored. The idea of like being stuck in this just feels like, And I couldn't work out at first what it was. And then I realized, oh no, it is actually conversation. I think I was reminded because I had a good one weekend and thought, wow, what a difference that makes. And then I guess it was a mixture of, I need to solve this problem because I want to have great conversations and they matter to me and my well-being. And also they give me a sense of spirit and life. And I'm really optimistic about having an amazing life, an amazing future. And the other one is, wow, this is just really interesting. Like, what is actually happening? And why is no one else noticing what's happening? Of course, what I realized talking to people about the problem is that everybody has the same problem, but no one really knew how to solve it. And I guess I'm quite determined. So I was like, I'm going to solve this problem because I need to solve it. And I think it'd be interesting to solve it. Did I think it would become a business? Not really. I mean, in the back of my mind, I knew I wanted to start a business at some point, but I didn't necessarily think like that at first. So I was just like, I'm going to get obsessed with the problem and then see what I can create out of it.
So you created this organization, this business called Trigger Conversations. What is it? What does it do?
Yes, what does it do? Okay,
that's a bad question. But now
it's hard.
But it has to be answered, right? So it's hard.
It has to be answered. You're right.
Yeah.
So it started as a series of events where people would be able to meet each other, have more meaningful conversations, right? So I created a conversation menu structure, and they would invite people to drop into deep conversation very quickly with strangers. And they'd be like an hour and a half to 2 hours, and I ran them every month. And they were a great success. To be honest, I was surprised how well they worked as well. And they developed a really interesting following. People were turned up and had double numbers, triple numbers. And it turned out it was just a thing that people wanted to have in their lives. Like they were simply bored of having the same conversation twice. I did this for an amount of time. I experimented with other models. We did dinners, we did singles events, and they all worked quite well, but they were quite a lot of work. And events don't bring in much money, so it was quite difficult to sustain. However, I then got a second question, which is, okay, so this is great, but how do I do this in real life? Like, I can't wander around with question cards asking people questions. I mean, you could, we don't know, it's a mic thing, isn't it? But it doesn't feel organic. So then that sent me off a slightly different trajectory, where my new question became, okay, how do I make this possible in real life? So then I started thinking about how do we have a conversation with somebody out and about and go deep very quickly? So the second arm of my business arose, which is the training side. And that was part informed by, I did a coaching program. I'd also already done some coaching training in NLP, but I did a proper one, and I attended other trainings as well, and read a lot. I read a lot. So I was really learning, and I now develop workshops and I do training programs to help people have better conversations, and not just for their own, friendships or dating life, but also for business. Like, people are now realizing, oh, I actually need to develop the relationships in work so I can either be promoted or I can go and start my own side hustle, or my own personal well-being. So I did a training as well. And other arms have come out as well. I've been teaching people how to have conversations with strangers in the field. It's called in-field. Taking people out, like on the tube or on the street, and showing them how easy and difficult, because it's all quite subtle and nuanced, and getting them to just to basically build their armor, like get experiences, try and test things out in a safe-ish environment, getting feedback. So I've done a lot of that as well. And my business model has been very much changing. I've started working for organizations and running these conversation menus for conferences, for annual away days, for whatnot. Basically, opportunities for people who actually really could connect and get something meaningful out of it, but aren't. And then training for them. And I developed that for sales organizations, so they need to build relationships with their customers, and also looking at the internal culture as well in organizations. And then most recently, due to the coronavirus, we're now moving online. So we are in the process of reinventing, and I am running conversation menu events starting next week, an hour and a half, and doing all virtually. I've experimented. I've been facilitating some calls in the last couple of weeks, so I've got the structure out. I'm also midway through a blog on how to do this for leaders and organizations and communities. And I'll be running some calls as well to teach those skills. And it's not, what's different about this is it's not like, how do you do remote conversations?
Yes.
You download a Zoom account,
Yes.
boring tech.
Yes.
Not that. It's the small, fluffy details that generally make the difference.
Could you give us a couple of examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, some of them I already have earlier. So I talked about the check-ins and the check-out. Really important. There's also the sense of setting the context, creating the container. You have to be very much more overt and obvious at the beginning. Tell people what is their role. What do you expect of them? What are the rules here? How can you participate? There's definitely a place for spontaneity and creativity. So there's some fun games of being able to nominate the next person to speak who's going to share something. Or you can also pick up objects that are in your room and you can put them through the screen like this. And then someone has to collect the object and maybe another object which is different. That caused a lot of fun.
Right.
You can use the background. I was talking to somebody else who was deliver training and kind of self-care routines and talk about well-being. And I was like, okay, well, everyone's in their kitchen or in their bedroom. So you can immediately draw that back to, okay, so what happens when you're in your bedroom, in your kitchen? How are you feeling right now? What's the background noise? What are the things I'm not seeing? The joy of this is that everybody's experimenting. So being free to make mistakes, and that will create laughter. So the human side comes out wonderful flavor. Group size is really important. So you can have a lot of people on a call, great. But a lot of people listening to one person for a long period of time, not great. How quickly can you get everyone to share their voice? Now, Zoom has this beautiful feature called breakout rooms. So you can put people in a room with some questions or a particular stimulus and get them to talk about it, and then return everybody back after, say, 8 to 10 minutes. And it's great, works really effectively. And it means that everybody participates and doesn't get bored, basically, because the problem with online is everyone gets bored much faster. They zone out. How can you get people to zone in? I generally find I've experimented with number sizes from all the events I run in person, and 3 to 4 is maximum, I would say, for those breakout room groups. Otherwise, people won't get to speak and you'll speak over each other, etc. What else have I got? The power of the facilitator.
Oh, right.
They are there to invite people, and they're not there to have the entire conversation. And I say invite because you can't really force people, but you can certainly make suggestions and help navigate the conversation in certain areas, and hold space and take things back and say, we'll come to questions in a minute. Let's first talk about this. You really, really, really need a good facilitator. Now, when I say good facilitator, learned skill. It's definitely a learned skill. So what people need to do is practice and get feedback. And that's partly why I'm organizing these sessions, is because I think that everybody can learn it. Everyone runs meetings at some point in their lives, certainly at work. But running an online one, you just need to be a little bit more hyper conscious of what's happening, and also your need to pull things back together more often.
I'm going to put all that in the show notes, so I'm sure there are going to be several of my listeners that are interested in all that. What has surprised you, maybe one or two things, the most on this journey? It could be, I don't know, it could be a conversation or a few individuals that came to one of your events and you're like, wow, that's these people are amazing, or just something in general that you didn't expect.
Okay, so what's coming to mind right now is how impactful and how needed this kind of thing is. On a standard entrepreneurial journey, I've had moments of, yes, to change the world, and then moments of, fuck, what am I doing in my life? and I'm like, oh, I haven't got a proper job, I don't know what I'm doing. And then I'll go to an event, or I haven't gone to an event I ran, and I suddenly get it. I'm like, this is why we're doing it. This simply having a beautiful conversation with somebody can uplift you like nothing else, and it provides you with a spark, makes you feel alive, that you can do then stuff in the world with. And I really cannot underestimate the power of this super skill. And I guess the surprise there is that it's almost so simple and so obvious to me, and yet that distracts me, I guess, from sometimes doing the work, because I think, oh, it's not important, but actually it's really important. So that's one thing. And the other one I would say is, again, entrepreneurial related, is how helpful everybody else is. How you cannot do anything really alone. Of course, it always looks like it at the end, like, oh, that wonderful person created this amazing thing. Yeah, whatever. They didn't do it alone. And, everyone goes through that journey. They have to ask for advice, for questions. When you're building anything, it's a learning process. And I was personally so surprised in my first year when I stepped away from employment, was how much time people would give to me to just chat on the phone, support me, help me find advice. Like my first venue came via a friend. Couldn't find one anywhere. And now I'm when I speak to budding people who want to like build their own thing, I literally am like, look, I will give you all the time. In fact, today I mentored 2 people this afternoon, and I was like, look, got a great idea. Just consider these things. This is how easy it is. You can do this. You don't need to know the answers. And they're like, oh, thank you so much for your time. It's so nice of you. And I'm like, trust me, I owe it. I've been helped so much. And life is so much sweeter when we are more helpful to each other. I mean, we're learning that now, right, from the virus. It's such a much, much better world, the kind of world that we want to live in when people help each other. So that, I guess, surprised me at first.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's wonderfully put. I think we could keep going, but we probably need to, I want to be respectful of your time, and this probably is a good place to start to wrap up. But was there anything that we didn't get a chance to discuss that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, okay, so I end with one thing that I've been thinking about recently, which is leaders don't need to know the answers. They just need to be willing to know, to go and find out where the answers are and to ask people. And I think now, even more than ever, we are at a time when we don't have answers. But what we do have is each other. And build those answers together and ask each other and find solutions. So now is time for collaboration, and that's why conversation is so damn important. And you don't need to be an expert to open up the space to work out how to do the next thing that's going to work out how to solve whatever problem it is with the selection of problems that we've got right now. So I guess it's just more of a trump towards just start, be curious, open your mind, be yourself, be human, and things will come for you. Serendipity will always find its way in your life.
That's wonderful. Great way to wrap up. Before we do, where can people follow you, find you, sign up to your events, all that good stuff?
So a number of places. They can find the events on triggerconversations.co.uk, which will be live ASAP. I can be found via Medium, where I write. I also have an email, Georgie@triggerconversations.co.uk, so you can email me. I have a few other, I write a lot on Facebook if you want to follow there, or I'm not really active on Twitter. I do have an account, but probably those are the best places to start with.
Perfect. I'll put all those in the show notes. Georgie, thank you very much for joining us. This was wonderful.
No, not at all. Thank you for having me. It was a delight to have a conversation with you.
So, now that you've heard some useful conversation techniques, why not use them to connect or perhaps reconnect with someone this week? And let me know how you get on. Drop me a note, allthingsrisk@gmail.com. And of course, give Georgie a follow and check out Trigger Conversations. We all could use this stuff right now. And the more of us that use these techniques, the better all of our lives will be. So please check this stuff out and please apply the things that you heard. That is it for now. We will be back with another great episode very soon. Until then, and as always, don't forget, risk is life.